Hello friends, we are over here visiting China Camp State Park on a beautiful day, and I'm going to talk about the basic tree climbing equipment for arborists. So first let's look at ropes. There are basically three kinds of construction for arborist ropes. 12 strand, this one, 16 strand, and 24 strand. So this is 12 strand, this is Samson True Blue. This is also known as solid braid. When you look at the end it has 12 strand and it's solid, there's no other material in the core. But there is a tiny little white strand in the middle of each of the 12 strand, and that can be an indicator of wear. So when you inspect the rope, if you have spots that are worn or cut, you will see some white, and then it's time to retire it because that strand is totally compromised. So this kind of fuzz is normal, you get some of that. But if you get one strand that's cut all the way, or definitely two strand, then you need to cut out that section. If you get a strand that's pulled out like this by picking, got caught on something, you can massage the rope and it will go back in magically. Look at that. And there it goes, it's back in. So it's good. So this is a 1/2 inch climbing rope, and some people prefer this, some people prefer 16, or 16 is probably more common. And some people use this for a load line, for light work, and that's okay too. But if you do it, you should be aware that it's only a load line, and you shouldn't have both. You should, if what you have or what your crew has is use these for a load line, they should not be used for climbing line because then they get mixed up. It has a breaking strength of 7,000 pounds, and all three of these are 7,000 pounds or more. And the standard for arborist is 5,400 pounds, so we're good there. The 12 strand is sort of nice on the hand, it's soft, it does not stay round as well as some of the other ropes. So it's best for a friction hit. Friction hits is not as good for using ascenders and hardware. And let's take a look at a 16 strand rope. This is known as High V. This has been around for a long time. A lot of people use this. This has a core. The blue stuff right here. The core is there to keep it round. It doesn't have any strength. The strength is all in the sheath and the 16 strand around here. And as you can see here, the core is this blue stuff to keep it around. This holds a knot well, and it has a moderate amount of stretch, and it's pretty good for climbing. This is, in this class, you're going to be climbing on 16 strand most of the time. You get to try 12 strand and 24 strand also, just for comparison. This is called fly rope, and it is a 24 strand kern mantle, meaning the mantle is a sheath around it, the kern is a core. So in this case, they share the load. The core and the mantle share the load. So the mantle is a little bit thinner than it is in this one here. That also makes it less abrasion resistant. So for this rope, it's more important to use protection. Use your Campion sabers. Sometimes it will milk, means that the sheath and the core moves independently. It's not much of a problem, but if that happens, you want to straighten that out, because that way only one of the two is holding the strength. So this rope has less stretch than these other ones, and it keeps its round shape much better. So it's good for use with ascenders. Talking about breaking strength versus the working load. The breaking strength is tested by pulling straight out on a new rope, and then at what load does it break. So when you do tree work, there are certain factors that make it break at a lower load. For example, knots will lower the breaking strength, and ropes tend to break at the knot, and I've seen that a few times. Somebody gets too ambitious, they want to pull over a big tree with a truck, the rope breaks right where it's tied to the hitch, which is better than it pulling the truck down the hill. And other things that weaken it is a bend ratio. If you go over something that's too sharp, that weakens the rope because the load, the fibers don't share the load. If you have a bend, if you go around something that's 4 inches big, for example, this pulley here for removals, then you don't lose any strength. That's fine. If you go over something smaller, this is a rescue pulley. It has about 2 inches diameter. That weakens the rope somewhat. The tighter, doesn't mean you can't use it, you just don't be aware. And the tighter it is, the less strength you have. So other things, of course, that weaken the rope is that they get old, get worn. The material of these ropes are nylon and or polyester or a blend of the two, most of them. There are some other materials like Kevlar and Dyneema, but for these, that's the case. So nylon ropes get weaker when they're wet. Just something to be aware of. A wet rope is weaker. If it's nylon polyester, it doesn't matter. And another thing that happens is you have something called cycles to failure. If you load a rope very close to its breaking strength and do it many times, then it will break even though the load is lower than the breaking strength. If you do it, in rapid succession, it'll break sooner. If you do it today, then tomorrow, then another day, that's better because it will have time to recover in between. So for all these reasons, the maximum working load for tree work is 10% of the breaking strength. If you stay within that, you're good. If this is 7,000, so your maximum working load is 700 pounds. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about rope bags. This is a convenient way to carry your ropes. And you can also coil them up, but a coil is, if you work out of a coil and coil it again, that tends to tangle more than if it's flicked into a bag and pulled out of a bag. So I have the ends tied off to a little ring that some of them come with, or the handle, and that makes it convenient to grab the end. And also I have these marked so I know, just by looking at them, how long they are. So red is 80, green is 150, white is 200 feet, and that tends to be not exact but sort of nominal sizes because they all get shorter as they get worn and you cut off the end, or they get nicked by a saw, which can happen accidentally. And sometimes it happens because climbers will reach out with a handsaw and grab a rope to pull towards them. Very bad habit. Don't do that. Every time he gets a little nick. So this is supposed to be 150. Well, it might be 140 after using it for a while. But for that reason, I actually, when I cut these, I make them longer. If it's 150, depending on what I got to work with, it might be marked as 150, and it's actually 160 for starters. In terms of the bags, there are various bags you can get. The cheaper ones, like this one, are soft. The more expensive ones have stiff sides. That makes it easier to flake the rope bag in. This one here is a small one that I have an 80-foot rope, and this is small enough and light enough I can carry it on my saddle, which I do sometimes. If I need an extra rope, I have this. I want to tie it twice while I'm in the tree. I can use this. Some of these even come with little side pockets and shoulder bags for carrying it for a long time. Let's talk about carrying ropes. These ropes are lighter, and this is the heaviest, and this is sort of in between, but this is pretty light, so that's a good thing if you carry it into the forest or climb. It's a good thing if you travel and you're trying to max out your carry-on weight. As far as the rope bags, this one here is actually I ended up with this one because we had a silent action and nobody else was bidding. So and I find out later it's supposed to have a lid, which it didn't come with, and it has a weird setup. It only has a handle on one side. There's a side handle over here. But anyway, I looked it up and it said this is the ergonomic design, so I guess that's how you're supposed to carry bags. But these other ones, they have the two loops to carry them. And I think we are pretty good on ropes right there. So when you store or when you transport your ropes, you want to keep them away from chemicals. You don't want to put the gas can on top of a coil of rope in the back of the truck. Chemicals will damage them depending on what it is and what construction it is. Also, sunlight is bad in the long run, so you don't leave them hanging out. You store them out of direct sunlight. Water is okay and you can dry them, but just be aware that a wet nylon rope is weaker than a dry rope. And the one thing about your climbing rope, you use them only for climbing, and you got to know their history. You don't lend them to your friend and he pulls a truck out of a ditch on the weekend. You don't know what it'd be used for. You don't buy used rope, you know, because that way, the more they've been loaded, the weaker they are, and you don't know how they've been loaded. So that's it. You take care of your ropes, and they will take care of you. This is a traditional climbing saddle with 4 D-rings, with a waist belt and a butt strap. So there's 2 ways of tying in. When you're climbing off your climbing line, you will tie in to the butt strap, and you'll be tied in like this and sit in the saddle. Then if you do removals and you climb with a flip line, then you use your top D-rings. And I keep this little non-locking carabiner on here just to keep these together when I'm working like this, so they don't flop around, slip out of this part here. So if you climb with spurs and you have your trunk here, you use a wire core flip line. You flip it around the tree, clip it into your other D-ring. And this has a rope grab. That means it's adjustable by hand. You can let slack out with one hand if there's tension on it, or take it up also with one hand as long as there's tension on it. And then I have this little strap here, so it keeps orienting itself in the best way. If there's a carabiner, I tend to want to twist in there. The thing about wire core flip line, basically it's for flipping. It makes it stiff enough so you can flip it. And when you get the really big trees, it gets tougher. Then you do what's called a roll. You roll it, create a roll, go around the tree. If that won't work, you got to climb the tree back and forth like this, and gradually move your way up. And that's what the wire core is for. It's not to prevent you from cutting it. If you hit this with a chainsaw, it'll still cut very fast. Just to be aware of that. And then I have here a ladder hook. And this is a convenient hook. You can hang a chainsaw on there. It'll go through either the top or the rear handle. And it's good for other things also. It's big, it's easy to reach down and open it and grab what you want without looking at it. And I put this on here just as a reminder, you always carry a handsaw, even when you do removals and it's all chainsaw work. A handsaw is just like a safety feature to have. And there are certain situations where you're going to use it, or you're going to need it. If you somehow end up that you got to finish the cut that's really close to yourself or close to the rope, you can finish it with a handsaw. If you cut a limb and it's tied off and it hinges down, and sometimes the load line will be right there in the cut, but it's hanging on by a little strap, so you don't want the chainsaw in there, you go to your handsaw and use it for that purpose. So this is a Buckingham butt strap traditional saddle. And then I have another one here. This is a new Tribe. It's lighter and it has a floating bridge. So this Buckingham is easy to put on and take off. You just unclip it and go like this. Now with these newer Tribes with the leg straps, you gotta step into them. So it has these leg pads. Rather than have the butt strap, it gives you more mobility. And these are real comfortable to hang on for a long time. And this is your tie-in point. Instead of having the 2 D-rings, you have a ring on a floating bridge. So if you turn, do some work here, this will move. Gives you more maneuverability that way. And Other than that, it also has D-rings. It does work with a lanyard around the tree. So this is a different kind of lanyard. This is a adjustable lanyard that's adjustable with the friction hits. You know, you go around the branch or the trunk, go into the other D-ring, and if you want to let it slag out, you go like this. You want to take it in, you pull out like this, and it's all one-handed. And this one is like 20 feet long, and this can even be used as a secondary climbing line. I could move it over here and use it as a secondary climbing line. And I like to carry it in the bag like this, so it doesn't tangle or get caught up on something. Some people will tie it up in a daisy chain. And one thing to be aware of, if you carry a chainsaw, make sure you don't have a long tail swinging around. That'll swing back and touch the blade of the chainsaw and get nicked. So that's that type of lanyard. This is another type of lanyard. This is a double-ended lanyard with locking snaps on either end. And it's easy to adjust. Taking out slack, one-handed, but to take in slack you need two hands. You need a hand and a knot. Because you can't have it pulley there because you use both ends. And that's the beauty of this one, is if you use both ends. So if you're climbing a tree that we call a ladder climb, there's lots of trees, lots of limbs, you could free climb it, but you want to stay tied in. You keep switching. You go over a branch, you clip it in, and you know the top one is one you're going to put your weight on. You weigh yourself on that one. You undo that one, climb higher, and then you do it again. So this is very convenient for that type of climbing. Okay, so when you use spurs, there are different kinds. There are three different kinds of upper leg straps. There's a leather one, which is just like an ankle like that, leather. Then there's these aluminum, hard ones, and then there's strap-on Velcro. I recommend either this or the Velcro. The leather one tends to move around a lot and gets tiring and dig into your leg. And then, if you're going to use spurs, you want to use old-school boots with a heel. You're not going to work with these. They tend to slip around. Camion savers or rope savers. They do both. They protect the tree and they protect your rope. There are basically two kinds, leather and the ones made from electric conduits. The conduits come in two sizes. The 3/4 will work for half-inch ropes. This will work for 11mm ropes, like the fly rope. So if you're going to get a few of them, just get the big ones. They work for all your ropes. And they are a little bit different. The leather one tends to stay in place on the rope because of stiffness. And these tend to come flying down. So when you release them, if you don't watch out, they'll come flying down and hammer your fingers. Whereas this one is easier to control. So it's a matter of preference. I would say if you're going to be in a very wet environment, you don't want to use leather. You don't want it to stay wet all the time. Then you want to use the conduit ones. And then I want to talk a little bit about carabiners. The ones you use for life support need to be double locking, or you open them with a triple action. So this one here, push the button, turn the barrel, open the gate. And then when you let go, they're self-locking. They snap right in place. That's what you want. This is one type. 1, 2, 3. Then this one here is another type with a spring-loaded barrel. You know, you push it, turn it, and open it. And same thing, they close on their own. This is good, this is good. Then you have the screw lock. Some people like those. So this one here, if it backs off, you'll see the red. And you know you gotta close it all the way. So they do have a problem, and I don't recommend them for your main tying point because they will back off. They can rub against the saddle, your body, or the rope, or whatever branch as you move around. So you don't want to have to always look and check for this. You just want something that's going to be locked all the time. They come in aluminum and in steel. Steel is stronger. This is an example of a steel carabiner for rigging on an adjustable sling. And they're good for life support also. They're a little more expensive. They're stronger. If you have one of each, they're rated at the same strength. The steel's going to be stronger to resist twisting motion as compared to aluminum. Some people say don't clip aluminum to steel. I say don't worry about it. What's going to happen in the long run is the aluminum is going to wear faster than the steel. But well, if it wears, you replace it. And it's better to replace the carabiner than the steel ring on your old style saddle, for example. And then there are various kinds of, they come in all different shapes, and the non-locking for your tools or whatever come in all kinds of different shapes too. Then I want to talk about throw lines. This is your basic economical throw line. This is about 1/8 of an inch, and it's about $60 for a 1,000-foot spool. There are some other brands, some other kinds that are twice as much. They might be thinner, maybe slicker. There's various opinions, but the thing is, they all gonna tangle sometimes. There's no non-tangle line, so I just go with the most economical. And then to carry on your saddle, you can carry a little bag like this. This I have about 60 feet with a 10-ounce weight, for when you want to advance your tying point in a tree. Then for shooting from the ground, you can use a cube like this if you shoot with a big shot or by hand. It feeds out nicely. Here I have a 14-ounce. And as far as the bags go and their weight, there are all different kinds. And the 10-ounce, 12-ounce, and the 14-ounce are the most common and the ones you want to have on hand. Then I got a whole bunch of them here. And I have some small ones, 6 and 8. Those are not going to work very well with this type of throw line and pulling it over brands. They're not heavy enough to pull the weight of the line and resist the friction. But they might work if you use a fishing line. Sometimes, shoot high, use a thin fishing line. You can use something like this. And as far as their weight, it's all a trade-off between how high you can throw, how easy you can throw, and how easy they will pull the rope back down. So most trees, if you have a eucalyptus, they have smooth bark, unless you have the loose bark hanging there. You have not too big limb. Maybe you go with 10-ounce weight. You have a big valley oak with a big limb with lots of irregularities. You go with a 14-ounce. And that's about it on those.
Go ahead.
Okay, so that was an introduction to the basic tree climbing gear, and this has evolved a lot during the time I've been in the industry, and there's a lot of new things coming out. So I started climbing trees in 1977, and I worked with people that still climb the manila ropes, and the braided ropes were just coming in. So I climbed with a braided rope, and I had a 3-strand manila flip line. And we had the basic climbing saddles that were basically lineman saddles. You go to the lineman store to get them. So since then, there's been more and more stuff coming out, and that is good. It's good to keep up. There's kind of two kinds of people. There are the gearheads that always want to try the new thing, and then there are the more conservative-minded people that always stay with the tried and true. Either one is good, and they learn from each other. I would just caution you, because there's an affliction known as GAD. It's called gear acquisition disorder, and it's very easy to catch. When you look at the catalogs, you get all excited and you need more gear. Well, all of a sudden, your whole house is going to be full of tree climbing gear, and your partner may not be happy. So be aware of that.
So this is where being able to use the hip thrust when you come up right underneath a branch, and you might have to get past it. So I'm going to show you something right here. This is how we transfer from branch to branch. We take a mini throw line along with us up into the tree. And what we do what I can do is I'm going to toss it over into this other arm over here. Rolling. The trick is to get it back to me now. This is one of the things we're going to show you in another class. Here, actually, I'm going to make another toss again. Rolling. Back to me. Yay! So, to secure that, what I do is pull up the other side of the rope. So this is called double end rope climbing. So you're using both sides of the rope in order to transfer from branch to branch. And it allows you the ability to go all around the tree now instead of just being stuck, having to go back down to the ground, go back up another rope. Now you can stay in the air, you know, for the whole time that you need to be up in the tree. So I've thrown a throw line over another branch on another spar, and now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to attach the end that I'm not using, and that's going to become the new rope that I will be using. Now the trick here is that you're still working with long distance here, and if you want to maintain control of all the ropes that you have, you don't want them to fall away from you, and then they'll be 20 feet away, and you'll have to pull up 120, 150, 200 feet of rope in order to be able to capture that end again. So generally what we try and do is we try and hook it into the belt somewhere, or hook it into our saddle, into an accessory carabiner, and I've got a little place over here that I'm going to hook it into, and then I'm going to pull the rope over to the other side. I have the cambium saver set, and now I've got the other end of the rope back to me. And at this point what I want to do is I want to secure this end of the rope first so I don't lose it, and then I want to stow the throw line that I've just been using so that it doesn't get tangled up. And now I go back to the rope again, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to remake all the same knots: the anchor hitch, the Blake's hitch, the stopper knot. Something very important too, and a safety measure, is never climb higher than your tie-in point. Your tie-in point is the place that your rope goes over the crotch or over the branch. So right now I'm about even with it, and that's all the farther I want to go. So that in case I slip, the only thing that's going to happen is I will swing sideways. I'm not going to drop. So now I've remade the knot series, and it looks good. I'm going to clip it into my belt. And tighten it up. And this is also known as a Tyrolean traverse. So I'm going to use both ends of the rope in order to transfer from one branch to another. So I'm going to get myself in position here. And I'll loosen up a little bit on one side, and then I'm going to tighten up on the other side. Now this one seems to be a little bit out of the crotch there, so I'm going to see if I can wiggle it back down into the crotch so I don't feel any sudden drop. And there we go. Now I'll tighten up the Blake's hitch and come down on that one. Tighten the new one. Down on that one. And now I'm being suspended completely. come down a little bit more. And you can even use your foot locking. And advance yourself. That's enough. More foot locking. Now at this point, I'm about ready to stand up on this branch, but one of the things you want to make sure is that this new setup is perfectly made and perfectly right. So you still want to check and make sure that your tie-in point, your branch is good. You want to make sure that all your knots have been tied properly. You want to make sure that you're connected into your belt, and you want to make sure that everything that you need on your belt is good. Okay? Ideally, you would also make sure that this knot can take your full weight. So I'm actually just going to go down a little bit farther, and I'm going to take all the slack out of the previous tie-in point until I can get the rope to wiggle, so that I know that this knot series is going to hold me. And that looks good. So I'm going to pull myself back again. And now it's going to be easier for me to climb up to this branch. And voila! We've gone from one side of the tree to the other. So, once you're on top of a branch, whether you're sitting on it, whether you're standing on it, you want to make sure that you take the slack out of your main tie-in now, which is directly above you. You don't want to have it loose and then have a possibility that you're unbalanced. You've got the rope, use it. That's what it's there for. So you can actually sit back in the tree and use a 3-point stance of your legs and your hips to be able to position yourself now anywhere on the tree. So we no longer need this tie-in point, so I'm going to take it apart, except I'll leave one knot in order to be able to retrieve that cambium saver. You want to take the carabiner off because it's a far distance there. You don't want the carabiner to be slamming up against the branches, and also it could potentially get caught in the crotch as you're trying to pull the cambium saver out. Looking good there. Looking good here. And it came loose, which is what we wanted. So now I'm just going to secure that in my belt for the next time that I have to transfer over to another branch. But right here, I'm actually standing on a branch, and so part of the training that we're going to be doing is called limb walking. And the thing that you need to know about limb walking is that it's easy to limb walk as long as you have a very acute or a very small angle. The farther out that you go on your angle from limb walking, the more dangerous it is that if you lose your step, you're going to go flying back and slam into the tree. It's not going to be safe. So you always have to pay attention to how far. About 45 degrees is almost a little bit too far. Maybe about 35 degrees away from the trunk or away from the tie-in point is where you want to be, so that you have you're not going to end up injuring yourself if you end up losing your footing. Right now my tie-in point is really close to me also, so that's not going to allow me very much movement on this branch. So where I would feel comfortable is maybe about 4 or 5 feet away from my tie-in point on either side. And that's about good right there. The practice is to get used to hanging in the rope, in which your body is just floating in space, to standing or sitting on a solid branch or on a solid trunk. It takes a little while, and it takes some getting used to. It's not something that we do normally in day-to-day life. So there is a learning curve with that, to be able to feel free to move from one situation in your body to another situation in your body. So when you get the chance on your own, practice just sitting free in the rope, and then standing up on the branch and moving around. While you're moving, always pay attention to your knot. As you get slack in the rope, push the Blake's hitch up. Take the slack out of the rope. Once you get a little bit farther away, you can loosen up the Blake's. And then vice versa. When you start going back, you tighten it up. And then you can start loosening up again. Now, the other part of your gear, as far as a professional, is going to be your flip line. And the flip line is going to help stabilize you, and it's going to be a very important part. Eventually you'll be able to climb with just your flip line and one end of the rope, conceivably, in most situations. But you always want to be tied in twice whenever you're doing any type of cutting. And that means whether you're using a handsaw or whether you're using a chainsaw, you always want to have 2 points of attachment to stabilize you, and in case you accidentally cut one of those attach points, you'll still have a backup. So in the case of limb walking, in many cases, your limb is either going to go drooping down on you, or it's going to be rising on you. So it's already going to be an uncomfortable situation because you're just tied in from one point, and you can't stand upright. This is kind of an ideal situation here. And your flip line is going to be able to help you stabilize that situation. If you need to cut the end of a branch, but you have no vertical branch in order to be able to throw around, what you're going to do is you're going to throw around the branch that you're cutting itself. But you want to leave it loose in case there's any tearing of the branch. So in the demonstration here, if I were going to cut the end of that branch, I can come out, lean down, and I would want to throw this underneath and clip in. And at this point, if I pull it tight, it's going to help stabilize me so that I don't have to use a hand in order to hold onto the branch. I can use 2 hands on the saw, or if I just have a handsaw, I can still have one hand bracing myself up against the tree. So that's one way that you use the flip line whenever you're doing the branch walking, whenever you get out to the end. And in other ways, depending on the position, you can still use it as a stabilizer on vertical branches as well. So now if I want to do some cutting here, if I wanted to cut this branch here, I can cut this branch down here, and I have 2 tie-in points. I can make them as tight as I want and be able to reach out. You can also use it, you know, this is from the same angle. You can also use it from opposite angles and really get a solid foundation. Now I can lean out here, and my body isn't going to wiggle, isn't going to go anywhere. I can just take a pole, take a saw, cut out here, and I know that my position is going to stay the same. Okay, one of the other uses of a flip line is to be able to use it in order to have it as your primary tie-in point, so that you can transfer yourself from your rope from one position to another position. So in this case, if I want to go higher up into the tree, I can use my flip line. And now that I'm tied in with a flip line, I can actually untie my primary tie-in point. Now I'm going to toss my rope up into a higher crotch. And now I'm going to retie my knot set. And again, I want to test this out and make sure that everything is safe. So before I take off my flip line, I want to make sure that I've got a good tie-in point, the branch is alive, the crotch is strong, big enough. I want to make sure that all my knots are tied properly. I want to make sure that I'm connected into my saddle, and I want to make sure that there isn't anything that I'm missing from my belt. And lastly, I want to put all of my weight onto the saddle before disconnecting. So onto this tie-in point, onto this knot, to make sure that the knot holds. Okay? So everything looks fine. I've got slack in my flip line, and I'm ready to go. Now I've got a taller tie-in point. I'm still at the same, relatively the same spot over top of this other branch. So it gives me more ability to limb walk. So now I can limb walk with more distance because I've just changed the physics. So if I could get out here, I can trim some of these branches. I can come out here, start trimming some of these branches, and about right in here is good. What I would do is, again, before cutting, take out my flip line, put in my second tie-in, and now I'm ready to go. So I can take my handsaw and start cutting here, 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 and clean up this tree, or cut off the end. Okay, so we finished doing all the work that we want to do up in this tree, and now it's time to descend. One of the major concerns that you have is, do you have enough rope? Because as you go up into the tree, there's less rope to go down to the ground. And the double rope system, since it uses both sides of the rope, it halves the amount of rope that you have whenever you're ascending to descend. So you start to use up all the rope. So you want to make sure that you have enough rope. I've got the other end of the rope on my saddle still, and if I didn't, what I would do is I would put a stopper knot in the end of this rope if I had left it on the ground, to prevent me from sliding off of the end of the rope. Okay? We call that the Whoa Jesus knot. or a stopper nut. Since it's on my belt, I'm going to find it anyway. It's going to come up to me if I've gone out of reach of my own rope. And yes, this does happen and has happened, where especially climbing taller redwoods or eucalyptus trees locally, they can be 100, 120, 150 feet tall, and many arborists only get 120-foot ropes in the first place. So as soon as you stretch that rope out, that's to its capacity on double rope, you've only got 60 feet. And you're still, you could definitely be higher than 60 feet on a 120-foot tree. So be very careful about making sure that you have enough rope to come down. And if you don't have enough rope to come down, you have to transfer to a lower branch until you do. So always keep that in mind before you start to descend. And the same thing, do not descend too quickly. You'll end up burning the rope, which is a costly thing. You don't want to be continue climbing on a rope that's been scorched. You'll have a real hard spot on one side of the rope, or a decent part of the rope that can go for 20 or 30 feet. It's very expensive to have to replace that. So always take your time when you're coming down. Don't try and bomb out of the tree unless there's an actual emergency that you're having to leave quickly. So the other thing too is paying attention to other branches that you're coming down on top of. You also want to make sure that the things on the ground that you're aware of. If you go up on one side of the tree and you come down on the other side of the tree, you may not know what obstacles are down there. On occasion, I've come down on bees' nests, yellow jackets. I've seen where there have been pictures of climbers who've come down on metal fencing with posts in them, and they literally impaled themselves. So you want to be careful as you get closer to the ground that you see. There are a lot of times you'll be in areas that may have had may be slightly forested. They may have sticks, dead twigs, dead little saplings that can be very sharp and hurt, considerably. So you want to pay attention to what you're actually coming down onto as well. As you start passing over branches, you want to pay attention to how much force you have on your blade stitch, so that you're not pulling down too hard because you're slowing down while you're maneuvering over top of other branches. It's also good to have anything that's loose on your belt tied up. Otherwise they'll tend to get wrapped around the rope, and by the time you get down, everything is a twisted mess and you're stuck 5 feet off of the ground having to wait for guys to help you untwist everything. And we're down.
So what I have here is a split tail system. It's the same as the basic climbing system, except the rope comes down, it's tied onto the carabiner with an anchor hitch, and then we have a second carabiner with an anchor hitch and a separate piece of rope that goes up, ties a blade hitch, and it has a figure-8 stopper knot. So the way this is useful is, in case I need to move it, go around a branch, I can unclip this, go around the branch, clip back in, without having to retie the whole system. Also, I added a pulley on this. What that does is I can take up slack one-handed. If I want to take up slack, the pulley pushes the knot out. So then I can also use this type of setup, a split tail, as a lanyard. And that is called climbing alternating lanyard. I have a lanyard here, and I can clip in with one at a time. I should always be tied in with something. So this tree is tall and skinny and has small branches. So there's no branch strong enough for me to tie into. So I have to tie in around the trunk. There's no branch I really can step on, at least out the branch. If I put my foot right up against the trunk and some weight goes into the trunk, I can use the branch as foothold. So I can't actually climb this. It's almost a ladder climb. I could free climb it, but we don't do that, but I'm going to alternate the tying point. So first I'm going to go up as far as I can with this tie in, and I'm going to switch around. Okay, so now I'm tying my lanyard. Now I'm tied my lanyard. Check that that's good. I'm not going to do this. So now I'm just like up on my lanyard. Got my weight on the climbing wall. So I can climb a little bit higher. Okay. Tie down on my lanyard, I check it, it's good. Alright. And that's it, I can keep going like this. I actually had I had a job recently where I had to use this technique because it was a redwood. It was about 115 feet tall, and it was part of a experiment. The seed went to the moon and back in 1974 on the Apollo mission. They planted it at Tilton Regional Park, and it grew well. It's tall, but it's real skinny. It has skinny branches. And at the very top, it had two tops with a narrow attachment, which is a bad structure, especially when it gets big. So they wanted me to climb it. But it's a live tree. You can't use spurs. The branches are tall and skinny. You can't tie into a branch. So this is the way you do it. You alternate, then tie in around the trunk and keep going up. And that's it. Split tail system. Good. So when you have finished your climbing, finished your work, and you need to retrieve your rope, you got to remember that you have the campion saver up in the tree. If you forget about that, you're going to have to climb it again. So the way we do that is tie a knot at the tail end of the rope. And then the warning shout is headache, and that's your warning for whenever something's coming out of the tree. Here's a figure 8. There we go. Stand back a little bit. Headache. Headache. And there you go. And then you stow your rope back in your bag. And this is actually the most convenient way of keeping and carrying your rope. It flakes in easy and it pulls out easier than if you had it in a coil. And then while you do that, you can let it run through your hand and keep an eye on it. That way you inspect it for any damage. If something gets stuck in it, or if there's a nick somewhere, you will see it and feel it. And that's it. So these campion savers, there are basically two kinds. This one, which is made from electrical conduit with little caps on it. It works well. Then there's another one made out of leather, which is a little bit stiffer. It tends to hold its shape. So this one will tend to slide down the rope real fast. The leather one will stay in position. So they're a little bit different. If you want to climb trees in a wet environment like the Pacific Northwest or the tropical rainforest, you're going to want this because you don't want the leather one to stay wet all the time. Then these bags are handy. I always tie the end of the rope to this little eye. That way I know where it is and I can look at it. I have them color coded. This green means that it's 150 feet. So that's it. Camping sailor goes in the bag. And we're good to go. Okay, we are here at the Western Chapter climbing workshop in Santa Rosa, and there are different stations. Some people are teaching aerial rescue. They're showing different tricks, different climbing system. Our friend John Traverso is teaching how to prepare yourself for the tree climber certification. He's showing people what they need to do in order to pass the test and taking them through the motions. So we will take a look at that and see how that works out.
My name's John Traverso. I've been coordinating the ISA Treework exam for about 20 years in the Western Chapter.
My name's Joshua Dislin, born and raised in Sonoma County. So, yeah, I've been climbing trees for 4 years. Did like 2 years of groundwork before I even started climbing. Been climbing for like 2.5 years. Own all my own equipment. Still have a lot to learn, but I love it. It's like a way of life for sure.
Just recently, about 2 years ago, we combined our test with the international test, and now the Treework exam has gone international, and we're using their format. And basically, the format includes a written test, which has approximately 50 questions in it. It has tree science, tree ID, safety, climbing, that kind of stuff, all in the test, in the written test. You need to have at least 70% right out of all those things to pass the test. Outside of the written test, I might also want to point out that there's a study guide for that test called the Sharon Lily's Climbing Guide, and it covers about 60 to 70% of the questions in the test. It doesn't cover all of it. So people think they're getting that guide and going to know everything. There's some other things like electrical hazard awareness that might not be in there. And we actually recommend getting the ANSI Z133 safety booklet and look under the electrical hazard stuff. You'll need to know things about line clearance, appropriate line clearance, what the different parts of an electrical pole mean, like the top high voltage wires, the secondary wires, the wires underneath, what those things mean, to be able to identify them. So those would be good things to study. As far as the practical exam, which is the climbing exam, before you can take that, you have to have be certified in CPR, first aid CPR, and you have to have performed an aerial rescue that's documented by whoever trained you on that. And you need to have all that stuff actually available and sent in, and 18 months of climbing experience signed off by somebody that will allow you to take the test. As far as the practical exam goes, a typical tree would have the first, you'll come up to the tree and examine everything above the tree, including high voltage wires. Voltage wires are probably, I would recommend looking for those first because they're the primary killers in our industry. And so always look for high voltage wires, and then look for defects in the tree, broken branches, poorly attached branches, cavities, raptors, birds of prey, things like that, bees up in the tree. You would want to look for anything that might cause you a hazard to climb the tree. And there are two other parts in your examination. There's above ground, which is like tables, cars, pedestrians, sidewalks, streets, houses, things like that you want to identify. Move them if you can, rope them off if you can, cone them off, whatever you need to do to keep the public safe. Below ground things such as water meters, electrical meters, sprinkler lines, gas lines, things that could be underground that you might damage if you're dropping things from the tree in it. So those are your tree inspection phase of the tree. All those things are pass-fail. There's also a section on tree equipment. You have to bring all the right equipment: hard hat, safety glasses need to be ANSI approved. Safety glasses are all stamped in here, Z87, and you have to have the appropriate safety glasses for our industry. Wearing sunglasses is not appropriate. They're not shatterproof. So you have to have the right gear, boots that protect your ankles, and then all of your climbing gear, your ropes, your saddle, your carabiners, snaps, all those things, flip lines, all those things you need to climb the tree. They, if you don't have enough of the equipment to do your climb, you fail the test. So you start, all these things are pass-fail so far, and then you have to inspect the equipment. Looking for stitch problems in the saddle, broken strands in the rope, carabiners that don't shut automatically. You have to look at those things, test them, and tell the judge, what you're doing and that they look that they're working appropriately. He wants to know that you know how to inspect your gear every day before you climb a tree. You do an on-rope rest where you actually throw a rope in a tree, put your climbing hitch on it, show that you know how to climb it, show that it holds you. That's a pass-fail too. If that thing slips, you're not allowed to use it. There's 6 categories of climbing of knots you need to know. There's different type of hitches. There's rigging hitches, there's attachment hitches, there's prusicks, footlock prusicks, hitches to send ropes up in trees.
Some of the knots in the beginning, I gotta remember the names of them and tie them properly within a minute.
There's options of 2 or 3 at each category of those 6, and you need to know at least one. You need to know its name, you need to know how to tie, dress, and set it appropriately, and you need to know what its name and what its use is for. So you've got to know your knots. Each one of those things gives you like a 35-point deduction if you don't get it right. And you have 1 minute per knot to tie, dress, and set it. So you need to be confident at that. So assuming you made it through all those pre-climb categories without failing, you're now allowed to climb the tree. You do your tree inspection, which I mentioned earlier, the above and below ground inspection, and then you start your climb. And your climb starts as soon as you release your rope or your throw line to enter into the tree. That's when the clock starts. You have 20 minutes to reach your final tie-in point, which is usually about 45 to 50 feet in the air, and 30 minutes total from the time you release the rope to do all your climb, go to 2 different stations, and come back to the ground. And the climb looks something like this. You'll release your line, you can use a throw line, you can make an arbor ball in the end of your rope. Usually the first tie-in point is designated somewhere between 20 and 25 feet. And you tie on your rope, you body thrust up in the tree. You could foot lock as well. You foot lock or body thrust, always staying protected. You get into the tree. Once you get into your first station at 20 to 25 feet, then you do another examination of the tree from above. And that enables you to look at tops of branches that may have decay, cracks, fractures, cavities, or something that you can't see from the ground. And always take a second look for wires. Because in real life, there could be high voltage wires above your tree. You look at it, see it from the ground, you start climbing, thinking about your climbing, you forget about them. So we emphasize always checking for that and knowing where they're at in relationship to where you're at. And it's unlikely that there'll be high voltage wires by your certification tree, but always look for them. So you advance to your first station, you inspected the tree, now you advance another probably 20 to 30 feet to the final tie-in point. And the reason why we don't let you throw your line all the way to the top is we want to make sure you're proficient at staying safe and always tied in and as you advance. So you use your flip line before you untie your high line and then you advance. At any time you're not connected to the tree, you have both your climbing ropes connected, we will stop you, make you tie in, and we'll tell you to come down and you're done. So we don't want to see anybody falling out of trees. Should never do that anymore. So now you advance to your final tie-in point, which is somewhere around 45, 50 feet. You don't have to actually get there yourself. You just need to get your rope there. So you can toss your rope up over the final crotch that's designated, tie off, and then you proceed to your last 2 stations, which one is a handsaw station, and you'll walk out a branch that'll be marked with a ribbon. You'll flip light in, and yell stand clear, preferably, or at least headache. Allow the judge to respond back all clear, so that you know you can do your task. Your touching the ribbon symbolizes making a pruning cut, so you would always make sure that your people underneath you are clear. You move to the next station, which is the pole pruner station. You'll get to that station, you'll flip line in, you'll ask the judges for the pole pruner, they'll tie it on with an inline clove hitch, they'll send it up, you'll disconnect that, so you say stand clear, make sure everybody's clear. You take both hands at the end of the pole pruner and touch the business head of the pole pruner to another ribbon.
Climbing out and flipping in and touching that with the pole, I'm not the tallest person, so I barely reached it.
Once you've done that, you take the pole pruner and you hang it on a nearby branch with the hook side away from you, so that if it fell, it didn't hook you and cut you. And then you pull up your rope, you make an inline clove hitch, you grab the pole pruner, you slip it over the pulley side, never through the jaw, through the pulley, cinch it up, send it down. Once you're done with that station, you're done with all the parts in the trees, you make a smooth, controlled descent to the ground. When you touch the ground, your time stops. At any time in your climb, if you have too much slack, and by too much slack it means that your loop in your rope goes below your knee from your tie into your waist, we will ask you to tend that. If we ask you twice, you'll be disqualified, and we'll ask you to come out of the tree. So two times leaving too much slack, and you're done. So tend your slack. That means about 2 pulls of thrust going up the tree before you tend your slack to keep that from going below your knee. Other things that might be a problem would be it's okay to swing from branch to branch as long as it's controlled. I like it, it's fun, it's part of tree work, but it has to be under control. If you're slipping and slamming against stuff and potentially hurting yourself, we're going to ask you to stop, or at least don't do that again. You may get a warning. If it's really dangerous, we may ask you to stop.
There's risk involved, it's really dangerous, but it's up to you to manage and, assess the risk that you're going to put yourself in. So I like the fact that it's mostly in my control. I couldn't be in an office. Well, it's not for the faint of heart, that's for sure. Just have fun out there.
So other than that, you reach the ground, you've done everything you're supposed to do, and you're under 30 minutes, you should have passed the test.